It has been 22 years since Chobits aired in Japan. Feel old yet? And ever since then, it's been sort of a surprise that the whole robot waifu trend didn't take off. Well, enter My Wife Has No Emotion, a new series in the summer 2024 anime season. While not ecchi like Chobits was, it sort of follows the same premise. The idea of if a robot can actually love a human, at least a lonely salaryman. A creepy concept for some, yes, but in the age of advancing AI and robotics, it may be more relevant today than it was 22 years ago. Sorry, Shinzo Abe. But anyhow, this is my first impressions of the first episode of the series, so let's jump right into it. My Wife Has No Emotion opens up with Takuma, and Takuma is a businessman that pretty much works all the time. He says he's been alone for the last 3 years. All he does is pretty much go to work to late hours, comes home, eats, sleeps, then goes back to work. Well, because of his busy schedule, he can't handle his housework, despite the fact that he has a small little apartment. So he decided to buy secondhand a robot maid. Now this is a very simple robot. All it does is basically just do dishwashing and food prep. He puts like set amount of food inside the fridge, and based on what's in the fridge, it will produce a meal that is randomized in its kind of database. Well, one day while he's a little tipsy on the drinks, he decides to blurt out something to the robot. Man, it would have been really nice if you were my wife. To which point the robot immediately turns and stares at him and he says, oh, it's just a joke, and just kind of goes about his night. Well, in his mind, he's thinking about his lack of a love life. He talked about how he had a girlfriend back in the day, but that romance didn't work out. At the same time, acknowledging how pathetic it is that, yes, this robot in front of him is pretty much just an advanced rice cooker. Well, he's shocked when dinner's presented to him and it's omelet rice with a heart on it, immediately making him consider, wait, is this robot in love with me? He starts poring over the manual over and over again, trying to find out if it's a special feature or something in the robot itself, and yes, even questioning the idea of if a robot can actually love. He does consider the idea that since it was secondhand, the previous owner could have put a certain special mod inside of it. Well, that's when his robot, Mina, starts to act a little strange. In a fit of confusion, he starts drinking a bunch, and she starts bringing over pitchers of waters in order to help him with the hangover, pouring out his drinks to prevent him from drinking any more than what he should be, to eventually asking what she thinks of him, to her response being, well, I'm your wife, aren't I? I looked it up on the internet. Aren't I supposed to be your wife? You said that earlier. Well, this shocks him, but he kind of goes along with it and even welcomes her into his bed as, you know, what a wife and husband would do. And thus begins their life together as husband and robot. So my thoughts on My Wife Has No Emotion. To be perfectly clear, when I came into the show, I wasn't really expecting much. I'm like, okay, this is probably going to be a goofy rom-com about a guy that gets the cute little robot girl that does everything for him, and it's probably going to be very kind of leaning heavily towards the fandom that likes the more subservient waifu types. But in the end, I was actually pleasantly surprised. I think the comedy so far works decently well. Most of the comedy, and my assumption is going to be for the rest of the show, probably most of the comedy is going to be centered around, yes, how kind of socially awkward Takuma is. And he's not creepy, but at the same time, he does work way too much. Thus, he doesn't really have much of a seemingly handle on social interactions with people, especially females, which kind of surprised me. You think that he would have some interactions with females at work, but that's not here nor there. But his awkwardness around Mina, the robot. Now, yes, I think a majority of the comedy is probably going to be more on Mina and her responses to Takuma. Because, yes, Takuma is going to be saying things that are, you know, in human terms, going to be something that's insinuating something. And Mina is always going to probably take that information and process it literally, and it be wrong. I mean, a good example is the whole situation with Takuma saying, you know, what do you like? And her response is like, you know, I don't really have a like, I don't eat. And he's like, oh, no, that's not what I mean. He's trying to ask her if she likes him, and she's taking it literally. So when it turns to him saying, I like you the most, and then he kind of goes, ha ha ha, no, whatever, just joking. It kind of turns this whole thing where suddenly he's having nightmares because he thinks that Mina is going to take it literally and serve herself as food. And so he has to immediately tell her, look, I know I said that, but I don't mean that I want you to cook yourself. And so she has to kind of correct it like, oh yeah, that's a good thing, because even if you did want to eat me, you don't want to do that because I'm made up of parts that are poisonous no matter how you cook it. So again, I think that's going to be probably a lot of the comedy is going to be centered around Mina taking what he says, processing it, searching the internet for information on what to do, and then processing it back. Or being way too literal about what he's saying. So again, when they get in the bed together and Takuma is breathing heavily and aroused, she's picking up on it, and so she's searching the internet to try to find out why he's horny. And so, yeah, again, it's going to be her kind of grabbing information, processing it, and being very literal about the stuff while he's trying to be vague or, use ways of dancing around that socially we typically do. So I think that's going to be fine. I think that's going to be probably a lot of fun. And so far what they've done with it is very basic, but I can see them possibly doing something more with it going forward. Now, the other side of the show itself is obviously going to be the romance, and I don't know if it's possibly going to get into social issues and commentary around the idea of a human loving a robot. I don't know. I so far it feels very kind of settled. Even when it does get into Takuma and his struggles with romance and socializing, it hasn't gotten too heavy. It does seem like there was a bit of his depression there and his feelings of loneliness, but it didn't dwell in it too much. So I'm not sure if it's going to try to get into that. Because yes, the obvious statement here is somebody that has been alone for 3 years. He works all the time. He doesn't have any sort of romance. He briefly mentioned the idea that he had a ex-girlfriend. He had a girlfriend that he had at some point, but they broke up because it didn't work out. In the manga, it specifically says that she was very pretty, she had a nice rack, and she was very kind. But things didn't work out. But he says that he would never really get with a woman before because he finds them to be too talkative about what they like and don't like. Like they're too naggy. And so it kind of goes in that whole territory of I never got with another woman because they just are too expressive and they get too much into needs and wants. And that, again, right there, probably a reason why they cut that bit, because he kind of seems like somebody that just wants somebody that will just shut up. But I'm not going to look too much into that. I think it's probably just playing the idea that, yes, back then he was younger and he was with some girl that was just kind of naggy, a little bit immature. But again, it is technically playing into the idea of how socially alone he is and how this robot is sort of inserting herself into a position that he has a hole in. Again, I'm not sure how heavy it's going to get into that. The idea of why are you getting with a robot rather than an actual person? Why not go out and find love? Based on the fact that it does technically show the girl in the manga that he was with and says that he was never going to meet her ever again, it kind of makes me believe they're flagging the idea that eventually that ex-girlfriend is going to show up again. I mean, even when I was watching the anime, I'm like, yeah, that girl's going to come back and probably want him, and then he's gonna be like, no, I got Mina now. But again, I think right now with so much discussion around the idea of AI and romance with AI girlfriends, AI boyfriends, it does make you kind of wonder if this show is going to make some sort of commentary about that, or if it's just going to stick strictly to he's got a cute girlfriend that's a robot, and robot shenanigans, AI shenanigans, searching the Google for information shenanigans. There was a side of me that did kind of get a chuckle about the idea that, yeah, it does sort of fit in pretty well with something like Chobits. They both got a robot that is with them. They were secondhand. With Chobits, he found her basically discarded on the side of the road, took her home. With this one, he's spying her secondhand. And the question mark the entire time for at least Chobits, and I'm assuming with this one, is who was the previous owner and what did they do to this thing, because it's not actually acting like your typical robots. And it could be, yes, that they'd probably put some advanced AI inside of Mina, and that's why she's actually searching the internet, because that's the question that I had immediately when she brought up the idea of checking the internet. My question was, does normally they do this? Because if it's just doing dishwashing and recipes, why would it search for something? Unless it's there for in case somebody says, well, I want you to make this, and it's not in the database, they can bring that recipe into their system. Visually, I like the show so far. I will say it is a massive bump up from the manga. At least chapter 1. I don't know if the mangaka got better as they went along, but at least with chapter 1, which this episode covered, it didn't look good. So it's kind of a nice touch-up that they did with the anime adaptation. They still kind of captured a lot of the art style of the manga itself, and it looks so far decent. Mina so far is really cute. They're really nailing the kind of aesthetic of her being very kind of muted, but at the same time, that kind of peeringness that comes from the eyes itself, I think she looks really, really cute. I found it kind of funny that in the manga, they have this massive crate that she has to stand on in order to do the cooking. They put a little stool there for her in the anime, but I do find it really cute. She got that petiteness that's going with her character design that I think is really adorable. Takuma himself is really fine. I think they're doing a really good job of kind of being expressiveness of his kind of, again, kind of creepy but sort of prodding nature of love that he's kind of doing, but is still doing really well. A lot of the shots during the night and whatnot, the glow of her actual charger and whatnot, I think it looks good. Hopefully they can keep the quality itself up going forward. I will say the OP gives me a little bit of pause because they have this one character in the OP, it's like this little small robot that's like looking like it's probably gonna be extremely obnoxious. And I'm like, is this gonna be like the Sumomo character? If so, please get this character out of the show because it's not going to be a Sumomo character. Sumomo is great. I love Sumomo, but this character looks like it's going to just be super obnoxious. With Mina being a very passive character, a very submissive character, I'm assuming this other character is probably going to be one that's going to insert itself into the presence and the chemistry of the show to be sort of the thing that pushes him away and tells him to chill out. So, I don't know, it could end up being something that's going to, yes, add some comedy, but probably be extremely obnoxious. But that's just based on seeing it bugging Takuma in the OP. I could be completely wrong. But Tsuma was the best girl in Chobits, by the way. I will say, for the most part, the music and everything else and the sound and everything is fine with the show. I just do not like some of the choices for music, especially when she drops the omelet rice on the table. It was like, oh my gosh, what is this music? Please shut it off. Please shut this music off. Oh my gosh, no. It was not good. It was kind of irritating. But yeah, overall, I think it's fine. It looks good. It's got a decent comedy bit in there that I think will probably do well. At the same time, Takuma's not too creepy, and in shows like this, a character like this can get really creepy. He's got a little bit of an edge of creepiness, but for the most part, he's not as bad as I kind of assumed that he was going to be. My heart does kind of feel for him. I think the idea of people kind of being socially closed up and be able to find love in the world is technically a very prominent thing that's happening right now, and I think this has kind of been handling it well so far. But that's my thoughts on episode 1 of the series so far. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. As always, if you did, make sure that like button down below, comment, let me know if you think of the series, or we're going to be checking it out. Additionally, if you're new here, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you get all my content. I will be doing first impressions of all the shows of the summer season coming up, so definitely stay tuned. If you like this content and you want to support the channel more, I have a Patreon link, tips, links, so thanks, membership down below. Greatly appreciate what it does. And until next time, y'all take care.